Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Pause the video right now to check out my social media, my radio show, and thatdrummerguy.com. And most of all, enjoy the following presentation. Hello?
Hey, it's Zach. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. How's it going?
It's going great, man.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to be able to do this interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, of course, we are here to talk about the debut album from Into the Great Divide, which just came out this past Friday. I've gotten the chance to be able to check this out pretty much over the course of 2018 so far, and I really love what you were able to accomplish here. I mean, I love this style of instrumental music where it just focuses so much on melody and harmony when it comes from the guitars, and with everything that's come up with this album, I'm glad to see all the positive reviews that have been coming with it, and just great hearing such a fantastic album in 2018.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that.
Oh, not a problem. So how did this whole band come to fruition?
Well, I think I would call it more of a story than a band. I think I would refer to it more as a desire that I had to be able to tell a story, to create some sort of a narrative, rather than just putting a band together. You know, and that's actually where the whole thing started. It really didn't start with music. It really started with this goal of being able to create a new medium for instrumental music, or at least a different medium than I had ever experienced before. The thing about instrumental music, especially guitar-oriented instrumental music, which I love, by the way, I really love it. But the issue with it has always been that when I listen to this stuff, it's really hard to figure out where you are. It's hard to determine what a song actually meant. What did the artist intend with his composition, right? There's no context. So when you're listening to one instrumental song versus another instrumental song, the thing that always struck me was just the level of virtuosity that might be inherent in the performance, right? Or maybe some differentiation in how somebody actually created a song in the first place. But, you know, the thing about a song with a singer on it is that they can tell a story. They connect their lyrics. There are things that are actually being told that people can connect to. And I wanted to find a way to bridge those so that I could create the album that I wanted to create, which was instrumental, but still have it connect to people in a way that actually made sense contextually, which is by telling a story. And the device that I came up with was this idea of a novel, effectively, where the narrative would actually tell people where we were inside of the story, and then I can compose each one of those tracks to coincide or match with where we're supposed to be in the story, mood, tempo, any of the dramatic elements that are in it, all the pieces of it really put together in such a way to take you from one part of the narrative to the next. And that's where it all started. Prior to writing anything, that's where I started with the whole thing.
And that is such a cool concept for it. And just like you said, I mean, with so much with instrumental music, I mean, it's always up to interpretation to the listener's ears to be able to figure out what's going on. And a lot of times that can be different from what the original concept for the story was. So when you put together something like this and be able to have this really cool narration and the soundtrack to go along with it, I mean, it really does make for a great story.
Oh, I hope so. I appreciate that you're saying that. I mean, you know, when I started this out, I had not found anything that had been done quite like it before, so I wasn't really sure how it was going to turn out. As an example, I wrote the narrative before composing the music. I hired the voice actor before composing the music. So, you know, the story was actually told, and what it gave me was a set of guidelines, if you will, right? Barriers in some respect that helped to make composing it, in some respects, easier because I knew what each of the chapters themselves was supposed to represent, and in some ways a lot more difficult because I had to find a way to actually journeys from one piece of the narrative to the next. And so as the album unfolded, it was almost in a strange way like it was writing itself, right? Because I was just filling in the blanks between narrations and trying to get to a place where I had a seamless story from beginning to end.
So with that, was there any particular challenges when it came up to the songwriting aspect of it, like any particular segments or anything, or did it just start to flow naturally the more you got into it?
Well, I would say that it flowed for sure, but having never done anything like this before, there were a lot of challenges along the way. I think I was really fortunate in a few different ways. The first is that very early on, I got the support of Richard Cheek, produced the album. I'd connected with him on the concept, and I had perhaps 1.5 tracks that I had laid down, and had the benefit of being able to meet with him directly, and he really latched onto it very quickly because it matched with a lot of the things that are important to him with respect to how to create music. He's a consummate professional, unbelievable talent in production, engineering, and really actually kind of pretty amazing musician himself. And so for starters, I had the benefit of being able to work with him, bouncing ideas back and forth, working in person whenever we'd be in the same town together, and crafting it with guidance. So that was kind of the first piece of it, where it became more of a team and rather than just a singular effort. The second was that the person who orchestrated a lot of the album, Brendan Cassidy, who's also my business partner in our digital agency, I had he was there the whole time, and so as I'd worked things through, I had the benefit of being able to lean on him for ideas and concepts, and maybe more importantly for simplifying some of the approaches that I was taking. And he was really the second part of the band, if you will, that came on board to help me think through how to get it done. And then the final piece of it was when we were getting close to being complete, and we had sent some of the earlier raw tracks to Mike Mangini to have his feedback and input, and have him provide me with guidance, and then ultimately come in and kind of stitch it all together with his drumming, really kind of put the final polish on it and really turned it into what it is now. And so even though it was a singular effort where there were a lot of complications or a lot of work that went into composing and performing it, I did have the real benefit of being able to work with these people who are incredible and who really helped to kind of guide me and push me when things, got hard to create what ultimately became the full album.
And I think a lot of people forget about that too. I mean, especially when you're putting together an album like this, where you're doing so much of the work, where sometimes other aspects of it do fall to the wayside if you are doing it 100% by yourself. So the fact that you were able to have these people on your side being able to help with production and orchestration, and of course getting someone like Mike Mangini to be able to play actual drums on the album, I mean, it took a great idea and just expanded upon it so much further.
Oh, without any question. I mean, look, a lot of people like to think that, inspiration is right. It comes from a singular individual, but it's really not true. In most cases, it's a team that helps to create some of the greatest innovation that we've ever had. And in a lot of respects, even a lot of the greatest art that people have created over time, the inspiration is driven sometimes by others. And feedback really helps to make sure that, especially when you're doing something where a lot of it is on your own, getting that kind of constant feedback allows you to keep focus on the goal that you have and not really get lost in the journey, so to speak. And that's what I experienced with respect to the album. Because again, I had never done anything quite like this before. I needed that team around me, pushing me both with experience and with the passion that they had to see this project be completed. And I think that, for all of us that participated in it, we're really, really pleased with the results.
And with that, I mean, obviously with having these people being able to help create an album like this, did you have any ideas of what you wanted them to accomplish on there, or did you just let them take what you had and be able to expand upon it?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm not really sure. I think at different parts of the process, it was a little bit different, the roles that we all played. I mean, most of this was recorded at home. So most of this was recorded late at night at home with nobody else around. And so during those moments of composition and performance, it was really just me in a zone, basically trying to figure out how to create the outputs that I wanted, how to get the sounds that were in my head onto disc, so that it could match what was in my brain. And in doing that, that requires at early on programming drums, playing the guitar, performing the bass, playing the keyboard parts. In those moments, it was kind of all a very isolated experience. But, the following day, being able to send off clips from what I had done and starting to get that feedback on the fly, that was really, really beneficial. And in some cases, I was getting feedback that I would immediately take, very direct feedback. Rich would say, hey, here's what I need you to do from this section to this section, lock up the lead guitar with the bass and see how that works as a transition. Or Brendan Cassidy would suggest, hey, perhaps you can pull back the guitar there and just let the keyboard actually punch through. So very direct things people would give me feedback on that I'd get to go and experiment with. At other times, it was kind of the opposite. I would ask them for some very specific guidance, or I would ask them for some very specific things, with respect to some of the orchestration. Talking to Brendan about what my idea for how some of the orchestration sounds could work behind a guitar, and then he would actually go and do that. Or with respect to Rich, especially when it came to the mixing, things that I heard that were a little different than what he heard, and it gave us the ability to collaborate and come up with something that ultimately was a real real team effort.
And I'm so glad to hear that too, rather than just being able to have all these people work as essentially hired guns and just doing what you have a vision for, letting them being able to expand upon everything in their respective roles, giving you ideas, you giving them ideas, and just making a very collaborative process. And I always feel that when there's a vision like that, there's so many great ideas that can be really brought to the forefront.
Yeah, well, I have a hard time finding examples in history of things that people tried that were really new, where they did it all by themselves. And I guess it's possible, but any example of something that's pretty innovative, right? It has tons of people that are involved with it. I mean, I'm having a hard time kind of thinking of a specific example. But let's say something like the Oculus Rift. Are you familiar with that? It's a virtual reality device, right, that Facebook owns.
Yeah.
That thing was actually created by a 15-year-old in his parents' garage. All right, there's this kid named Palmer Luckey somewhere, I think he was in like Long Beach, California, and he basically created the idea. He put together the first Oculus Rift in his parents' garage. But and so that was kind of a singular vision. People had talked about it before, but what he did that was really innovative was he made it something that seemed relatively affordable, and he focused on the things that mattered most. He didn't focus on visual quality. He actually focused on field of view. His thinking was that if you put something on your head and you can't really see the edges of the screen, it gives you a higher likelihood of being fooled into thinking that it's actual reality, right? So there's some really singular vision that he had around that. But the rest of it wasn't just done by him. He needed people who were really incredible at what they did to come in and help to bring his vision to life, and in the process change a lot of the vision. So he funded it through Kickstarter and raised a few $1 million, which was incredible, and actually created a whole bunch of them. Then he brought on some of the leaders in virtual reality technology to figure out actually how to make the thing work so that it didn't make people nauseous when they were using it. He had guys like John Carmack, who had created Doom and lots of the earliest, most successful video games. So I think it was like a billionaire who actually came in and dedicated his efforts as chief technology officer for the company. And ultimately they sold it to Facebook and got the leadership of somebody like Mark Zuckerberg to take it to the next level. That's a singular vision that was modified in a significant way by a whole hell of a lot of really smart and really talented people to bring it to life. Now, I would never in a million years equate what we did on the album to something like Oculus Rift, but it was something new. It was something different. Right? The rock novel narrated instrumental concept I had not really heard before, and nobody that I've spoken to yet has really had any example of where they've seen that before. So in order to do that, I needed similar help, and I kind of feel like in every experience that I've had professionally, whether I come up with an idea or somebody else comes up with an idea, it takes the right people to ultimately help to advance that idea, and those people constitute a team. It's never just an individual vision, I think.
Yeah, and that is such a great point. I mean, whether it is something like the Oculus Rift, whether it's this kind of album or any other venture in life, I mean, being able to have the right people behind you, even if it is a singular vision or a dual vision or however many people it takes to come up with an idea, and being able to get the right people to put their thoughts and ideas into something, it can always expand upon something and make it bigger and better. And again, it's just bringing it back into the album. It's great to be able to see like such great lush orchestration, the amazing drum work of Mike Mangini, your fantastic playing that goes into the album. I mean, just all of these great things combined with some amazing production work just made for a fantastic album.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I really do. I really appreciate hearing that. It's really satisfying to hear it, especially after the amount of effort that went into creating the thing in the first place.
And with that, of course, the album just came out back on Friday, which was, of course, a NAMM weekend that was going on in California as well. How does it feel to actually have the album out now for everybody to hear? Really gratifying. First, because the response we're getting is as positive as I could have ever hoped for, and second of all, because now I can actually talk about the whole thing. It's not just a piece at a time. It's really the entire thing is out there, and it gives me an opportunity to gauge how people are responding and what the best way for us to approach that over the long run is. How to support it with listening events, or how to follow it up with another musical experience that will ultimately go and create. Having it out there is the tool that gives us the ability to capture the data that helps us to make those next decisions. And with that, what has been the response that you've heard so far?
Overwhelmingly positive. Oh. So, I mean, people really seem to like it. Now, to be fair, the people that really like it are people who like progressive metal. So this is certainly in the sweet spot, it seems, of that musical category. It's a category of music that I really love, and so I'm really, really happy that there are dedicated and passionate music fans of the style, of the genre, that seem to find it really, that it's living up to what some of the expectations were with it. So now, so from that perspective, I couldn't be any happier with the way that people are responding to it.
Yeah, and that's such an important thing to remember too, is when you are making an endeavor like this, I mean, you gotta have your full support behind it too. I mean, when you're making music, especially in 2017, and now, of course, with the album coming out in 2018, it's more important than ever to make the music that you want to make, rather than feeling like you have to write this for a specific audience or trying to cash in a certain way, because that's not the way things work anymore. When you're making music, you gotta make it something that you're gonna be proud of and be able to say, yes, I made this music and I love what I'm doing.
Well, I think so, but I think that if I were starting out as a musician, I might look at it from a slightly different perspective. I mean, the music business is a very difficult place right now in a lot of different, from a lot of different perspectives, right? It's very hard to get signed, so it's very hard to get a major label supporting you, and that support is really important, right? It helps with marketing and credibility and cash to press records, to the extent that they're still bought and deliver them globally. It's more difficult than ever, and more than that, there's more music that's actually being created than ever, so it's harder to cut through. There are more distribution points than ever, so it's harder to be heard. So from the perspective of making a living as a musician, I think it's really, really difficult. I think there really are only a couple of different ways that people can approach it. The first is to really push for what is commercially viable. So there is nothing wrong with going out there and honing your craft on pop songwriting and production and finding a way to get to artists and work with artists or be an artist that has the ability to cut through from a commercial sense. Because at the end of the day, that's really where the money still is. And if somebody's going to go out there and look to be a professional artist, musician, or producer, there's nothing undignified about approaching it that way. And there's some really amazing stuff, I think, that's actually out there in the pop and commercial world. At the same time, there's something really great about having the freedom and flexibility to be able to go and do only what it is that you love, even if it's not commercially a very high potency part of the market. And I think that if you can carve out a niche and really focus in on that niche and really master that niche, there is also an opportunity to create a real career with respect to touring and merchandising and connecting with your fans in unique ways and potentially creating relationships with your fans where they'll pay for access to certain content that other people won't be able to access. There is a real opportunity to be able to do that as well. So I think it's kind of both.
Yeah, that's actually a great way to describe it too. I mean, being able to look at it from both sides like that. It's just I know so many people that do play music that their heart is not behind, and they get burnt out so easily. Like they can enjoy it for a couple of years before they realize that they never want to make music again. And I always find that to be really sad. I mean, if your heart and passion is making more commercially viable music, then by all means make sure that you go into that and put your whole heart and soul into that. But it's just if you're just looking at it from the financial aspects of it, I mean, it'd be really nice to be able to make music that you can put your heart and soul behind, whether it is pop music, whether it is instrumental metal, or whatever the case is. I mean, just making sure that you enjoy what you do.
I think there are a couple of different ways to look at it, not to turn this into too deep a conversation. But here's the thing that I would say for artists. I think it was actually Scott Adams who said this a number of years ago. He's the guy that did the Dilbert comic books, cartoon strips.
Yeah.
Wrote an article about being successful. And what he suggested is that there are a lot of people that say, do what you love, right? Do what you're passionate about. That's how you'll ultimately be successful. And I think, lots of people hear that throughout their lives. That's fairly common advice to be given. His thesis is that that's totally backward. That's totally wrong. That's not it at all. Not to be successful. To be successful, do what you're good at and then become passionate about it. That's actually the trick. And I think that's really influenced my thinking with respect to a lot of things in life. I think that mojo, which is the intersection of what you love doing and what you're good at doing, that's the place to kind of aim towards. So if you're a good musician, I think there's a really good chance that if you're really good, that if you focus on becoming passionate about what music you're doing, you can be really, really successful. I think that if people are unhappy playing a particular musical style or format, it might indicate that they need to kind of modify their attitudes and not necessarily the style of music that they're playing. Does that make sense?
Actually, that does. That's actually a great perspective on on that. I mean, there's parts of that I knew it before, but being able to hear it in that kind of way, that actually does make a lot of sense.
At least, look, that at least is my specific perspective. I assume everybody's got their own. This is one that has really worked for me, and that I've noted in life as I've gone along that it works for other people. With respect to the musical format that I chose for this, I did not do it for any commercial reasons. In fact, I went headlong into it knowing that this has very limited commercial appeal, right? Instrumental progressive heavy metal, it's not like, that doesn't roll off the tongue, right? You didn't see half of the Grammys. You didn't see instrumental progressive metal bands that were up there showing off their capabilities. But for me, it certainly alights a certain passion. It's something I've really, really enjoyed ever since I was young. I've always loved it. I just wanted, if I was going to commit myself to doing something musically that had that format attached to it, I wanted it to be different. I wanted to be able to tell a story in a different way. I wanted it to be able to be a narrative that people actually connected to, and not just a bunch of tracks that had music on it, right? I wanted the music to really mean something, even if it limited in some respects what I was capable of doing. It was okay as long as it connected to the narrative. And so that was the choice that I made. And I would think that for anybody who has a career that's not in music but still has a deep passion for music, I think my recommendation to those people would be to lay down the tracks of the music that you really do love. If you're not necessarily focused on purely making it a career, but you're doing it just out of passion, then of course the music that you are most passionately connected to is certainly the music that you should be looking to record. And the great thing for musicians, whether they're musicians who are starting out at 18 years old, or they're professional musicians who are touring, or whether they're dentists in the Midwest that still consider themselves to be musicians, the technology that we have available to us today to be able to record really high quality stuff and to get what we have in our heads out into speakers so that it actually represents what it is that you're thinking and feeling, we've never had it so good, right? We've never had this kind of technology before at our disposal. It's inexpensive, incredibly powerful, sounds phenomenal, and I think that for me at least, having access to that was part of what triggered the desire to ultimately do it and to create the album in the first place.
Yeah, and that is such a magnificent point when it comes to that too. I mean, when I'm listening to the album, it doesn't even sound like it was a home venture for the most part. I mean, it sounds like that you spent the money and you spent a few weeks in a studio making sure that you got all the right amplification, all the right guitars, everything that goes into like a high-end studio rather than just at home. I mean, that is such a great thing about being able to record things from home, so much more inexpensive than what it used to be, and being able to come up with a phenomenal product like you just have.
Yeah, I mean, look, there certainly are some limitations. I would imagine that had I had the benefit of being in a high-end studio with incredible microphones and world-class amplifiers, that I could have gotten sounds that were even higher quality than what we ended up with. And for certain things, we couldn't do it any other way than to do that, right? So to record Mike, we really had to be in a big studio. We were really lucked out. We were given access to the Foo Fighters studio, and we're able to track to this amazing Neve console that they have there that's really legendary, and it really did make a difference. That certainly helped. And there are other little things, like honestly, the organ sounds. We remiked the organs and threw it through a Leslie in the studio. You can't. There's just something about it that you can't really simulate with absolute perfection yet. You can get really close, can't fully simulate it. But the rest of the album, was recorded fully home studio style with one guitar, one bass, one trigger keyboard, bunch of sounds, and a Kemper amplifier. And basically, we were able to get what I think is kind of 90% of what we would have gotten if we had been in a multi-million-dollar recording studio with all the finest equipment at our disposal the entire time. And that equipment is available to anybody, right? That Kemper amp is available to anybody. The tones that I used are basically free once you have that Kemper amp, right? The sounds for the keyboard that I use, half of them or more are just built into Logic. Apple gives them to you for free when you use the application. So those don't even cost anything. That's really the incredible thing about it.
And with that, how much has this whole experience for you? How much has it inspired you for what would be coming in the future for your musical endeavors?
A lot, in a lot of different ways. I mean, certainly the desire to tell a story in a new way, to use music as a vehicle for storytelling. That's really kind of embedded itself in my thinking. Not only with respect to music, but with respect to everything. I mean, I feel like I am a professional storyteller anyway. That's what my company does. We help people tell stories with digital, and we've had the benefit of being able to do that together for a really long time. This is a new way of kind of approaching a similar thing. The other thing, though, is that I've learned so much. Right? I've learned a lot about the technology. I've learned about performance styles, things that I didn't really know before, and I've learned about the software, the hardware, all the pieces and components of it that are necessary to go into it. And I feel like having that benefit will give us an opportunity to do even that much more with Into the Great Divide over the long run.
Yeah, and again, it's just, that's so incredible to hear. I mean, with the all the reviews that I've seen for the album, people talking about it online, my own perspective, hearing your perspective when it comes into the album, it's just, everything about it is just giving me so much more of a new perspective when it comes to listening to the album. I mean, whether it's just from the production aspects or the songwriting aspects or just how the whole album was made, it's just a newfound appreciation for it. And it's so great to be able to see something like this really do come to fruition, being able to come up with this new idea of storytelling when it comes into instrumental music. And it's so cool to see that with the overall positive reception, that it will lead to more in the future, because if this is what's going on with the first outing, I can't wait to see what's going to be coming next.
I can't either. I think I will tell you that we have some ideas of how to do this that I think will be really successful. And again, having the benefit of that team still really, really deeply into what it is that we're doing, it gives me the ability to start working on ideas earlier on with the same group that helped to bring to fruition in the first place, with all of us knowing how the others work now. I think that it'll give us an opportunity to continue to do things that hopefully will surprise and delight the people that are listening to it at the end of the day.
Oh, fantastic. Well, once again, thank you so very much for taking all this time to be able to talk to me about everything that's going on in the world of Into the Great Divide, which, of course, the debut release is available now, just coming out this past Friday. And again, like I said in the beginning, I've had the chance to be able to check this out pretty much throughout 2018, really being able to check out the nuances musically, the storytelling, the production, and everything with it. And I just absolutely love that this is a debut album, that being able to have all of these different layers and just being able to see where things go in the future where it comes to this kind of storytelling and from this concept in general. And it was amazing to be able to talk to you, getting some new insights, some new perspectives that has never come across my mind before, and just being able to have a great conversation about some great music.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate the opportunity too. It's been great to speak with you.
Before we wrap things up, is there anything else you'd like to mention that I hadn't brought up yet?
I don't think so. I think this has been pretty comprehensive. But if you can think of anything else that you'd like to ask, back out to me directly. I'm really happy to address it.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that sounds great to me. And, when songwriting begins for the next release or whatever happens next with your musical endeavors, I'd love to be able to talk to you again and be able to see how much you progressed since then.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. I'd love that opportunity.